with your mom, the writer, when they wrote about this person, that it was actually a person that was alive and did all of this. But it just shows us, how great the process can be for a mother and a wife. And I'm gonna read it in the NIV. A wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night and provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her task. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand, she holds the distaff and grasps the spindles with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hand to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gates, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. I mean, this is a magnificent reading from God's word. And so, as I said, don't put this comparison on your mate or on your mom or anyone else, but it is a noble process, and it's a noble yearning that all of us should have. But it shows, again, a wife, a mother, who takes care of her kids, who she's a real estate investor. She buys land, she plants a vineyard, she deals business with the merchant ships. I mean, she is, the who's who's, but it's just one that we can always strive to be. And as Mother's Day comes up this coming Sunday, if mom is alive, please tell her how important she is to you and in your life, and your wife and the one who has raised your children. Be as gracious to her as you would be to your mother. Let's have a prayer. Holy righteous Father, we thank you for this day. Father, we thank you for the mothers that we have that are living. Father, we pray that we will give them honor and respect and recognize them on not only that day, but many days, Father. And for those of us who moms are no longer with us, Father, let us cherish the memory and instructions and the examples that they set for us in our life. The old poem, Father, he who rocks the cradle, rules the world. It doesn't have to be someone has been significant in life or in public life, but someone, Father, who took care of us and raised us with love and adoration and admirations to us. And so, Father, we lift up the mothers that's among us and before us, Father, and we just lift up the memories of those who are not with us. And we just praise you, Father, and lift you up in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Tom. That's so well said. My mom is 82, And Bill and I, my brother Bill and I use her as the butt of many jokes when we get up and speak in front of people. She's just constantly giving us really good ammunition. She tries on the technology side, but doesn't quite get it. Even I remember one time, when they used to say, we're gonna kick butt and take names. She said, we're gonna knock them over and write all their names down. I mean, she's a trip. I love my mom. She's a trip and just an awesome person. And she's the one that actually got me into real estate. She all my life, my mom would not be around during birthdays and any kind of holiday, anything special going on. My mom had to show houses. That's when people want to look at houses. So I always said, I will never get into real estate, ever, ever, ever. And she pounded me. You have got to get your real estate license. It's something to fall back on. So when I was 19, I got it. And I've had my real estate license since the early 80s. I won't, very early 80s. Okay, it was 81. And I'm grateful that she did, pound that into my head because, I dabble in real estate a little bit now. But I want to take this opportunity to, again, stress what a blessing it is that we've been going through this COVID virus. I know there's a lot of bad things that it has brought our way, but boy, what it has done for us to be able to bring people in and people together with this Zoom meeting, because I've got some pretty incredible friends across the country. And one of my very favorites is on the house with us today. Eddie and his wife, Martha, are golden folks. I love them to death. I've had the absolute honor of being able to not only stay at their house, but to go to their ranch, which is really cool. in Nacona, Texas, right? And I love it out there. It's like you pull into their little driveway and it's like everything in your body just immediately relaxes. It's so awesome. I just love it. It's the cutest little town in the whole wide world. I love it, love it, love it. Eddie, everybody pretty much knows who you are. But I am just going to let you take it from here, my friend.
Well, thanks everybody. Thanks, Wendy. And I'm just sort of going to tell you what's happened to me over this virus thing, and because it's been a journey in 6 weeks. Note School has experienced the largest growth in Note School in 6 weeks in 20 years of having Note School.
Wow.
And in a text exchange with Wendy, I said, I just, always need to remember that isn't of me. And so, I've known a lot of you guys for a long time, see some really good friends here on the screen. And I've started 20 years ago trying to train this business. I'd been doing the business for 20 years. And then 20 years into that, I said, I'm going to train people how to do this. And my original idea in training was to train people to broker notes, because basically people didn't, they couldn't go do everything. And so I knew if I could teach them how to go find notes and negotiate to buy notes, they could bring them to me, and then I could upscale them into the marketplace. So one day early in this virus, I was talking to somebody. I've been on literally 2 to 6 interviews almost every day. On days that we're not teaching a 3-day class, I've been on that many interviews most every day.
Wow. And
so I was talking to a friend one day in kind of a podcast or an interview or something. And I said, it's funny how people see fear right now, because I've experienced the same thing when I started 40 years ago. And I'd never really lined this out. So it just sort of happened that I was explaining it. And I said, I started in the business in 1980, a year before you did, Wendy. And
we're both old, Eddie.
I was calling on realtors and home builders predominantly. And the reason I was is because in interest rates were 20%, most people were forced to carry seller financing to make payments affordable. So they would carry traditional mortgages were 20%, and they would carry a loan at say 10 or 12% interest, and it would saw down the payment amount. And so seller financing filled the void of expensive financing. So here I am 20 years old, and this is the first job I ever had. I had to take my spurs off kind of thing. And my father-in-law and his partner, my father-in-law was not my father-in-law at the time. Martha and I were dating, but we weren't even engaged when I started. And so anyway, long story short, he just sent me out to go call on these realtor and builder offices. And I didn't know, I was clueless. But I wasn't scared. And I would go in the door and I'm talking to these people, and these people have been in real estate for decades. I mean, I'm talking to people that are now my age and they were just, there was just generally a fear. They felt like they were losing their business. They felt like they didn't know what to do. And I remember like distinctly driving down the road thinking to myself, isn't this kind of weird? Like, I don't know anything and I'm not scared. It's the best thing I've ever seen. And I'm spending my whole day talking to people that are supposed to know everything and they're scared to death. Which one of us should be scared? And the answer is, I really should not have been the one with the solution. They should have been the one with the solution, but they were stuck in their head. They couldn't reinvent themselves. And I've lived through the 86 crisis here in Texas, which was later what formed a government agency to liquidate distressed assets called the Resolution Trust Corporation. That's quite a history lesson. And then in the early 90s, there was a real estate Well, I met this guy in the 80s, actually, and his name was Ken D'Angelo, and he was a house buyer, he and his brother, and they were buying houses, had a real estate brokerage firm, and then they were rehabbing houses, and they owner financed some houses, and I went and bought the notes, and he and I spent about a half a day riding around looking at these houses together. And he calls me about 1990, and he says, hey, I'm going to build a franchise on buying houses, and I want them to have a component where they can create a note and sell the note. And so he did build a franchise. It's called Homevestors. And so about 1992, he and I spent probably every Saturday together for about 3 months. We went to Walmart and bought 6 whiteboards and 6 easels. And we put them around our office, and basically we wrote a matrix of how to create notes that could be sold in the secondary market. And I was very connected with a company back then that bought notes called the Associates. And so they kind of laughed at me and, this old rehabber, he's going to drive you down a road and stuff. So we developed a system. At the time we started the conversation with Associates, they were buying $75 million in seller finance notes a year nationwide. Within 2 years of implementing the Homevestor program, and then obviously every big real estate investor in the country that liked that type of financing, not everybody did it, but a percentage of them did it, they grew to about $250 million in seller finance notes in less than 2 years.
Wow.
So we really changed real estate investing, truthfully. It's kind of like a Bible story. We didn't know the sea was going to part. I'll just tell you that. No. So I've been on a journey helping real estate investors in some way, shape, or form for a long time. And most real estate investors are hard to help. They're mavericks. They're hard to train. They don't want to follow rules. They don't want to follow guidelines. But I had the gold. And so I could make them follow the rules because their notes were worth so much more money. So I've sort of been on a journey my whole career of like understanding the value of a note. Like, what is a note worth? And like, you can make a note very valuable or you can make it very invaluable in little tweaks in what you do with a note. Some of them are big tweaks, some of them are little. And so long story short, I've been in a mastermind with Wendy and some other guys that I'm sure you know from around Charlotte. Larry and Michael Moulton, and just some other guys that are in the Charlotte area. And I've been in that mastermind now, I think 9 years, Wendy.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of years ago, and these are all high volume guys, and they're chest pumpers, and it's not all of them. I don't mean all of them, but there's some in there, and they do big numbers. They are the guys that all the gurus would talk about for sure. Like this guy does 200 houses a year, and this guy does 300 houses a year. And so, anyway, I'm listening to them, and they've all switched to wholesaling properties. Most of them are not buying and fixing anymore. They're wholesaling. Why do you think that's true? Why did they all switch to wholesaling? Well, the answer was pretty simple. They wholesaled houses because they could sell them, they could make the same profit without ever touching a hammer. And I got to thinking, what in the world, how in the world has the market got so upside down? You could make the same profit just to go get a contract. Mm. And the answer was, it was because of a TV series or TV network called HGTV. And that's it. I mean, HGTV changed real estate investing because there was when I got in the note business in the 80s, Martha and I married in 82, and I moved to Texas in 82, and had an old man. There was a lot of people. I bought a lot of notes, a lot of seller finance notes secured by land, dirt. I bought a lot of loan on country dirt, all kind of different kind of dirt. But people were owner financing land that was just kind of outside the circle as Dallas-Fort Worth was being developed. So, I mean, obviously, people would go buy a farm out there and get the seller to carry the financing for them. And we reached a market condition where they were just paying too much for this land. And a guy was in my office one day telling me about some notes. And I said, man, I can't buy those notes. I said, they're overpaying for that land, And he said, Eddie, we're in a bigger fool market. He said, we're in a market right now. This is prior to 86. He said, we're in a market right now. He said, when you buy a piece of real estate, you're just looking for a bigger fool than you. So we approached a market last year and the year before that was a bigger fool market. And that fool was named somebody that loved HGTV. And I'm sure I'm offending somebody, but I've got 40 years experience, and this ain't my first rodeo at seeing people get drunk on a price. What we realized, though, is that these guys that were flipping houses, they were making less margin per house, and they were making more offers to get one house bought. In other words, their conversions were dropping and their margins were dropping. And so I said, why don't you guys just buy on terms? And they're like, what? And so I go through and start talking about buying on terms. Now, let me just tell you that if you're in a group of very seasoned real estate investors, at least 50% of them will go, oh yeah, I've bought a property on terms. I know what you're talking about. So I sort of have learned to describe this like football. You see, Wendy, if you took a fairly non-athletic, overweight kid and he played B-team junior high football, he would tell you at Sunday school he plays football. And if you saw a guy that played in the NFL, he would say, I play football. So I've learned that people say they buy on terms is a very broad statement. Mm-hmm. And so what I have tried to do is to bring to the idea of how you would negotiate that. So I spent a couple of years, and we have some crazy case studies. I mean, crazy as in crazy. I mean, guys that had a deal that was so thin they couldn't make a wholesale offer, and the realtor wouldn't list it, and then they ended up over time, not up front, but over time they'd make $200,000 or $300,000 on the deal. So just think in terms of crazy numbers. And so this is the most fun thing I've ever done. But I've had a hard time, be perfectly honest with you, I've had a hard time converting a lot of these high volume guys. They're mavericks, they're hard to train. I've got a couple of dozen that I've really done good with, and I've got probably had 100 guys that all bought north of 100 houses a year come to note school in the last 12 months. So I've seen a lot of them come through and they would go, oh my God, that's really cool. But why didn't they go implement it? They didn't go implement it because they were so busy doing what they were doing, they couldn't figure out how to add it to their business.
We see a lot of that from the guys in Collective Genius. I mean, isn't it just crazy? Those guys that are such big wheelers and dealers, they're movers and shakers, but they kind of can't grasp this concept.
So, I mean, you get the Joe Cools, and they come, about 5 in every 50, you get a Joe Cool, and he's got this all figured out, and he's all that in a bag of chips. Then I see him 6 months later and show me a case study, and they tell me something that they did, and I'm like, I'm trying not to have a funny look on my face when they're describing because they've done the dumbest thing they can do, and they just don't even have a clue that it's dumb, right? Now, this is an art, okay? I've spent 40 years learning this art, right? This is an art, but there's some basics and ideas that they can do. And so I was really started out showing real estate investors how to buy on terms so that they could pay retail for a property, but it was wholesale financing. You get that? They're paying full price, but the way you structured the terms, it's really a bargain. And that's really what I started doing. So when all this virus started, in the first week, my phone, like literally, Wendy will tell you this. I don't want to really be on Facebook. I'm on Facebook for some degree for business. Otherwise, I wouldn't even have a Facebook account, right? It's just not my thing. I have dyslexia. I don't write well. Wendy will assure you, if I send you 4 sentences, I'm going to leave a word or two out of those 4 sentences. And worse than that, I'm going to spell something the wrong way. You can spell red, R-E-D, and R-E-A-D, and Word says they're both correct. So, it's not my genius zone. And so I really don't like doing all that stuff. And I'm not the Corey Boatwright of Facebook. And I love Corey, by the way. But I communicate a lot more with Corey offline so he can put what I say online. So by the way, if you see Corey's on a kick right now talking about the mortgage industry, that's because of me, because I had to tell him there was a problem. That's a true statement. So my phone just started literally blowing up. And so the answer right now is this. Listen, if anybody tried to forecast exactly where we're going to land, I would say that would be pretty ridiculous. So I don't know, where Charlotte lands. I don't know where Dallas lands. I don't know where Atlanta lands. But let me tell you this. We have a credit crunch in the making, and it is a significant problem for real estate. And the answer is real estate investors are going to be able to deal with this fairly well if they learn how to do it. And realtors are going to be terrible at it. Mm. And so there is advantage real estate investor. So basically before the crisis, we kind of went back to subprime lending. We didn't call it subprime lending. So then because of Dodd-Frank, there was two qualifications of a loan. There was a qualified mortgage, which is a loan that really could qualify under a debt to income ratio and those kind of guidelines. And we call the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA loans, those are called GSE loans, right? Or agency loans. Basically, they're loans written to a government-sponsored underwriting guideline, and then those loans with insurance are sold in the secondary market. FHA actually has insurance. Fannie doesn't really have insurance, but Fannie has a standardized guideline, both of which the top end of that loan, they get a third-party insurance company called mortgage insurance to ensure that if anything happens to that loan, they'll pay the first 25% of the loss, right? And that's how mortgage insurance works. So all of a sudden, then there was another kind of a mortgage, which was they couldn't meet those guidelines, and those were not called qualified mortgages, non-QMs. And so that became these were the ITIN buyers, the self-employed, the this and that stuff. And it was really just subprime lending was back. And they originated about $1 billion worth of those loans, and they were selling those loans in the secondary market. And really, like over a weekend, snap, those loans weren't sellable. And so the warehouse lending facilities, the companies that loan money to mortgage lenders, saw that these loans were stuck on their warehouse lines and they couldn't liquidate them. By the way, they were also loaning money to another industry called hard money lending. And so a lot of the big boys that, quote, had Wall Street money, that was what it was. They were getting money from warehouse facilities. And so they cut them off and they said, you can't loan any more money. And so all of this is brewing. As of yesterday, I have a really smart guy that works for us. He actually lives in Michigan, but he used to work for a hard money lending company that was kind of the first back out after the 2008 crash. Worked for a guy named Dave Stack, actually. And his name's Kevin Moore. He works for us, and he's just an underwriting nerd. I mean, he's a walking encyclopedia. So he reached out to us yesterday and says, well, there's a new standard. Actually, it was 2 days ago. He said, if you make an FHA loan today at sub 640 credit score, he said, you can sell that loan for a max of 94 cents on the dollar. And he said that ranges from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA. He said that credit score rocks up and down. But the bottom line is that those loans are worth 93 to 98 cents on the dollar, that you can no longer sell them at par. So let me just tell you something. Mortgage company can put out their rate sheet. You can go Google Fannie Mae guidelines all day long, but the mortgage banking world right now, you can look out on your horizon for the next 60 days, and it is fixing to be a new world. And that's, by the way, they have even a term for this. They call it the COVID overlay.
Wow.
And it's a mortgage banking term. Now, by the way, you're not going to read this in the news until they finally enough Eddie Speeds of the world to tell them there's an issue, and they'll wake up and know it in about 30 days. But it's a thing. It's a story that hasn't been made yet. It hasn't been written about yet. It's in the making right now. But this story drastically means, and look at hard money lending, right? Most every hard money lender out there has dropped their loan to value by anywhere from 15 to 25%, right? And they're not being bad. They should do that. But that means if you're a house flipper and you're going to flip a house to an HGTV buyer, he's going to pay your fee and he's going to pay for the rehab. He used to get a 90% loan for the cost and the rehab. That combined, he could get a 90% loan. Now, all of a sudden, that loan's about 70. And so that means he's got 30% skin in the game in the deal, unless one thing, and that is he can negotiate to get the seller to carry a second lien. And the industry term for that is called a piggyback second. So now all of a sudden, every real estate investor in the business decided they needed to know something about seller financing. So that's why I've been so busy. In fact, Wendy, we have had 1,200 people attend a 90-minute presentation, and we've had 600 people come to a one-day class.
Wow.
And so, and by the way, when I say that, they had to stay on 80% of the time or we didn't count their number. So just because they clicked on and hung out for 10 minutes or something, those aren't in the numbers. So it's kind of a crazy time for us. And so I'm going to kind of jump forward. I'm going to kind of assume that everybody gets the idea of what buying on terms is. And then I'm going to talk about the skill of understanding what you're negotiating for. Okay. First of all, let me say this. If you're, let's just use a number scale so people can relate to it. So we'll go 1 to 10. 10's the most likely, 1's the most unlikely, okay? If prior to the virus, getting somebody to let you carry terms over time, that scale was maybe a 2.5, okay? So in February, it was a 2.5 scale of the likelihood somebody would let you carry ridiculous terms, right? That scale today is probably a 7.5, maybe an 8. So here's the idea. The idea is that they can either take a gigantic discount on their note. And by the way, you may not be buying it at the same price. You're still buying it at what I call the COVID discount. But if you do that, then also you have to understand that you can overpay for a property and based on how you pay for the property. So Wendy mentioned before we started, she says, I've got somebody negotiating terms and they're going to carry it. And she said, and no interest, right? And there's all kind of ways people say it, principal only payments or whatever. So Wendy, what you're doing is you're paying them more for their equity, but they're willing to carry their equity over time. And I'm going to say time is with a capital T, because time is the most important part of this argument. So most people look at interest and look at, I'm going to do that. I'm going to share this with you guys because I think this is like some cool stuff. Can you see that?
It's coming. It's there. There we go. We have your main screen.
All right. Well, let's pull up my main screen here. And I'm going to go to, if you've ever been to a class, you know that I'm fairly famous for all my little Excel widgets. I'm not an engineer, by the way. I'm as far away from an engineer as a human being can be, but I can make engineers drool. And it's pretty funny, actually. Let's see here. Trying to get this to come up. This is an Excel graph. I'm going to say okay to this. I don't know what I'm agreeing to, but. So this is an Excel graph that shows what a payment is worth. So let's just say the payment is $2,500, okay? And this graph shows that in 8 years, Wendy, that payment is really worth about 50 cents on the dollar. Okay, you see that?
Yeah.
So you go to the bottom, go up, and then go across, and then you say, well, that $2,500 payment due in 8 years is worth 50 cents on the dollar. So when people negotiate an 8 or 10 year zero interest rate loan, they're not getting the giant discount they think they're getting. And this is just Excel, right? This shows a future payment and the present value of that future payment. So see, there's somewhere a bend right in here where these payments, this back part of these payments in here, if you owe those that far out in the future, now that is discount. Okay? If you owe zero interest rate payments in here, it's not that much of a discount. The first 5 years doesn't have that much discount in it. Now, this is just math, right? Everybody understand, I didn't make this up. I just simply know how to build a graph that shows how to demonstrate present value. So I always tell people, you can be a great negotiator when you know what you're negotiating for. And you can be a great negotiator when you don't care, okay? So now I just totally change your perspective of what you're negotiating for. So let me tell you this, Wendy. These hotshot guys started coming to my deal lab every week, and they all said the same thing. Everybody wanted their payments in 10 years or less. Everybody wants their payments in 8 years or less. I heard this 500 times in a row. I said, okay, well, what if you got them to carry zero interest for 8 years and then you put an interest rate on it? Okay. And if I put an interest rate on it, what would be fair? Would it be fair if I put an interest rate on it of 3%. Because people listen to bank rates and they think that's seller finance rates. They don't understand that if a bank carried the loan at 4, seller financing ought to be carried at like 7 or 8, right? Because it's not a bank loan. It's not of that quality. So, so then all of a sudden I started also learning that some percentage of people would agree to 0 interest, but most people wouldn't agree to 0 interest. But here's what that they would agree to every time. If they were stuck on 3% interest, I could get them to 1% interest for the first 8 years. And then you could say, and I'll pay you a higher rate than you even want, but I've got to have a longer term. Now you have a perfectly legitimate reason you have to have a longer term note. You see, Mr. Seller, you have to carry a longer term note for me because I'm going to be smart and do what you're doing. You're like the furniture company. You're selling your house with payments over time like the furniture company does, right? And I'm going to do the same thing because we can make more on real estate if we do it that way, but I can't go put somebody to live in this house and ensure that I'm going to be able to pay you back if they have to pay me back within 15 years or 10 years. It just, their payment would be too high and we'd be forcing them into a bad situation. So that's why I have to have you carry it for longer, because what you want to do is predict on that payment stream forever. And I don't want to sign the note unless I know that that's going to happen for us, for me and for you. So you have to be logical as to why term is important. And that makes sense to them. You know, you ever go to the mortgage company and go get a 10-year mortgage, Wendy?
Not on purpose.
You see what I'm saying? In other words, so literally part of this process in negotiating is understanding it has to be logical to them so they can agree to it. Now, let me just tell you this. I can pay them a ridiculous interest rate because I've sawed down the principal, right? And I'm paying higher interest, but on way less principal. So the effective payment, if you looked at a 20-year loan, the effective payment would be way better if I did 0, 1, or 2% interest for 10 years, and I could pay them 6% on the last 10 years, and it wouldn't matter. Wow. Wendy, when you start giving them a rate they never thought they'd get, they will agree to extend the term almost every time if said correctly. That is spending 2 years with a bunch of hot shots, cutting up hundreds and hundreds of deals, and figuring out that I had to teach the real estate investor the most important single ingredient in this business, period, which is you have to get a longer term. Don't get drunk on 0% interest because it's not worth that much more money. Now, we have been talking since the conversation started on one term, which is interest. There's 50 terms you could negotiate. And the length of the note, the how long you're obligated to pay them back, mathematically will prove to be more valuable than the interest rate you're paying them on the loan. But that's still 2 terms, rate and term, right? Mm-hmm. And how a mortgage company says it, Wendy?
That's right.
So there's 48 other terms to negotiate. And those terms that you negotiate has all to do with making the deal work down the road. So what if I find somebody that was willing to sell or finance, Wendy, but they wanted 40% cash down, right? There wasn't any way they were going to negotiate unless they got 40% cash down. Well, I could go get a 40% first mortgage from a private lender and the seller carry a second for the difference. So I tell them that let's decide how much immediate money you need, immediate being money you have to have in the next 90 days. And once we agree upon that, then we can design financing accordingly around the rest of it. So I could structure a loan and give somebody 50% down. I could go get a private mortgage holder to do like a 6% first mortgage and pay that mortgage out in, say, 6 years, 5 years. And then the seller's payments would kick in when the first pays off. So the more cash he wants down as to how I could structure the deal. And that is why I keep saying it's the art of the deal, is that you can just structure. In other words, when most people listen to financing, they're listening to financing in their mind. They're listening to financing that's been taught to them because the bank or somebody like Wendy, a lender, taught them how to borrow money. So I've listened to financing terms, and I want to be the biggest. If I'm getting the seller to carry term for me, I want to be the biggest contrarian I can be. And I have learned that they have no discernment in understanding where I can make a killer deal, because they want the closing statement to have the number the closing statement has on it, which is the price. And they'll give the farm away in the terms if they get the price. And so this market condition is only better now than it was 60 days ago, because the seller is now open-minded. Now, there's a risk factor in somebody loading up and buying houses right now. There's an absolute risk factor, and that is that we see a further slide in real estate. Now, Eddie Speed believes that's almost a guarantee, right? I think it's almost a guarantee that we're going to see a slide in real estate, right? We got 15% unemployment. I know everybody's going to go back to work on the same day. And what if they don't, right? And we've got a mortgage crisis on the horizon. Wendy, I'm sure you're tracking that.
Mm-hmm.
We have a mortgage crisis on the horizon. So let me just tell you something, that the old HGTV buyer that would pay too much for a house 60 days ago, his amateur status is showing up kind of heavy right now. Right? He's not near as aggressive as he was feeling 60 days ago. And so those are all opportunities that make us make a deal that we otherwise wouldn't have made. So I'm fairly decent on the whiteboard at carving up cash flows and structuring crazy deals. And so that's what I've done. It's not that I'm really a math whiz. Actually, I'm a negotiator. And I just have learned to structure deals that people are willing to accept. So some of these real brainy types that can come up with these financial models that nobody can understand, the problem is they can't get anybody to play in their sandbox with them. I like to think in terms of, I'd like to come up with a financial structure that in my mind I already know how I'm going to say it to get them to agree to it, right? But right now their willingness to agree to it is excessively higher than it was, right? So, Wendy, why don't I just bake into the agreement a vacancy clause? Now, Wendy wouldn't agree to this, and the First National Bank of Charlotte wouldn't agree to it, but an individual will agree to it. Put a vacancy clause in there. If the house is vacant or for some reason not producing income, there's a moratorium on interest and payments.
Do you put a time frame on that? Did we lose him? I guess it wasn't a great idea, Eddie. I think we lost him for just a minute. Let's see if he'll get back on. Well, right now I can't get a hold of him, so he must have. He had some of that Texas internet going on. So I'd really like to get some thoughts from you guys. You would need to unmute yourself, but anybody want to have any input on what he has said so far? Come
Hi
on.
there. Good morning, everybody.
Hey, John Morey, how you doing, buddy? He's from Alabama, folks.
Yeah. Well, my thing is very interesting what he said, that you could say, I'll give you 1% interest for about maybe eight years, and then I'm going to bump it up to 6. I surely would like to see how to set that up in an amortization schedule.
Yeah, that interested me too. Because I'm thinking, when you add the 6 on there, I would imagine you're adding the 6 on to whatever the mortgage balance is at that time. Because you're paying down principal in a huge way during that first 10 years. But it absolutely makes sense to change to change that term. The moratorium, though, if it's vacant, that's, you know, Tom, Tom Latimer, you are a big time landlord. And if you were selling a house, how would you feel about having a moratorium on that if it were vacant? There, I've unmuted you. Wait, I just did it again. There we go.
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Are you not paying attention?
No, I am.
How would you feel if somebody asked you to have a moratorium on rent? You know, if somebody's vacant and if the place is vacant, would you not accept interest for, you know, the time period that it was vacant? Say it was vacant for 3 months. Would you say, okay, I won't accept interest during that time? Or payment, I should say.
I would be renting a U-Haul truck, backing up to that door, and whatever furniture's in there, I'm trying to get it out there to re-rent, resell.
It's interesting. Anybody else have an idea about that? Tom Olson, what's your thought on that? Let's make sure that he's even here, because I'm just seeing a face.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. Can you hear me?
And
I have an idea.
Okay, Jody, go ahead.
Maybe I'm going to say it, and it's not going to be politically correct, but if you know, they were a diehard liberal that votes for some of that crap, they'd accept those terms, maybe. Sorry.
That's a good point. I see a lot of smiles, a lot of laughing going on with the faces.
Hey, Wendy.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, to John's point, how you'd set that up, it'd just be like an adjustable rate mortgage. You just have that in the agreement, but I would say most people on this call wouldn't agree to a moratorium on the P&I payments for more than maybe 2 months max. But if you get the mom and pop landlords that have maybe 2 or 3 rentals and that are in their 60s, 70s, just almost tired of being landlords, they'd be more likely to accept it.
Yeah, and I think we got to consider who it is we're dealing with, and you know they're not the investors that we are. We're all active investors and trying to build a business. Tom, I see that you're Tom Olson. I see that you're unmuted. What's your thought on that? Can you hear me? I see his.
Can you hear me?
Now I can. Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say I wouldn't do it personally, obviously, but there probably is somebody out there that would. I'm not even sure landlords would. You might more, you know, the actual homeowner that you're dealing with that has the grandma's house that they inherited would probably be the more.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jeff Johnson, are you available to talk?
Here, but you've got to unmute me.
I did.
Okay.
So what's your thought on that? What Eddie's talking about, the terms and the length of the term and some of the add-ons.
You know, it's great. I mean, when we negotiate, so every negotiation that we get into now with every homeowner, we always have 2 or 3 different options with terms, and you know, it depends on what they're focusing on. It depends on what their focus is. If their focus is getting maximum price, well, then we get better terms. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's a fantastic strategy.
And Jeff, you're moving more in a wholesale direction now. Am I right on that?
Well, yes, just because we couldn't make any money flipping property.
What are you finding out there for people who are trying to buy? What are you what are you seeing? What are you seeing as a difference in your customer now from what it was before the virus?
There's definitely been a change in leverage. I mean, before we had the leverage. When we had a deal, we had the leverage. Now they have the leverage because they have the money. So we're having to get deeper deals, and we're having to do a better job of marketing. We're having to bring more information to the table. We're having to do inspections, especially a lot of these wholesale deals we're not able to send people through because of the coronavirus. So if we don't provide enough information, they don't get sold. So that's really increased our efforts. It used to be just chuck it on, chuck it up and someone would grab it. That is not the case anymore. So we've really had to double down and put a lot more money and effort and time into marketing these deals after we get them.
And you're really focusing in the Charlotte area market more than any place else, right?
Yeah, I mean, we start in Charlotte and really anywhere within an hour of Charlotte is where we're marketing. So we've got deals coming in all over the place.
That's awesome.
And we've got 3 lists. One list, of course, is our ultra VIP list, which is just a small amount of people. They get deals first. And those are our, repeat buyers. So that's been really good, is to build those relationships with folks who trust us and know that when we send a deal out to that list that they get first look. And that's how a lot of our deals end up getting sold. That's probably why you don't see a lot of our deals on Facebook or getting sent out on email lists, is because most of them go pretty quickly.
And you're hitting people that are cash buyers and aren't going to play any games, right?
Yep, exactly. People who've proven themselves over and over again.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference. Tom Olson, you're in a market that in the Indiana market, and are you finding that you're more are you wholesaling more? Are you still sticking with the turnkey? What's going on in your world?
We're still sticking with the turnkey, and honestly, I'm not having any problem selling them. But me and you have talked about this, exactly what Eddie was talking about. There is a major issue right now with secondary funding. So that's kind of just been my biggest challenge, is really on the back end of everything. I mean, for me, it doesn't even make sense to. It makes sense for me to do what Eddie's talking about, to buy. I'm still not sure it makes sense for me to sell any kind of seller finance ways, but our price point is a whole lot different than what other people are probably thinking about right now. So for me, if I'm all in the house, 35 or 45 grand, and I'm getting $950 a month for rent, it doesn't matter. I can hold it as long as I need to for the financing to figure itself out. So, but at the end of the day, that's our biggest problem, and it's been going on for 60 days. I mean, it shut off 60 days ago, and kind of lending out there.
Yeah. So folks, Eddie just joined us again by phone. Eddie, can you hear me?
So you're not going to believe this, but you probably will. So apparently something just happened to my internet. I mean, I got zapped. So I'm sorry about that. But
No worries.
The gentleman was just talking.
That was Tom
example,
Olson.
Though.
That was Tom Olson.
Hey, Tom. Yeah.
Hey, Eddie.
So Tom, here's the idea, right? The idea that people really, this is kind of new way of thinking, but it's an old way of thinking, right? You buy the property with long-term seller financing that's assumable and wrappable, right? And even if they go get a conventional mortgage, you have a baked-in subordination clause. So now you don't need that same mortgage that you needed before, because you have permanent seller financing that's second to the original loan or any subsequent loans.
Yep. That's a smart way to do it. So Eddie, before you got zapped, you were talking about having the seller consider a vacancy clause in their terms.
Yeah.
That kind of threw all of us for a loop. How in the world are you going to convince somebody to do that?
Well, here's my unique advantage. Okay, my unique advantage is I have looked at 300,000 or 400,000 seller finance notes, and I've talked to 50. 100,000 people myself that owned a seller finance note. Now that doesn't mean my staff didn't talk to more, right?
Right.
But I've personally talked to that many. And here's what I try to design things in a way that I have had this conversation with somebody because they carried a note with crazy terms. And in negotiating to buy the note, I'd ask them, why did you agree to that? And they would explain the logic to me of why they agreed to it. And usually it wasn't logical, but I'm like a high school English teacher, right? I don't need to personally, I don't walk around every day thinking like a teenager, but I have to know how a teenager thinks.
Mm.
So my mentality in all of this is, Wendy, the biggest risk for you, if you're seller financing me a property, the biggest risk to both of us is God forbid you had to foreclose on me. And I want to position myself where that could not be a scenario that either one of us worry about.
Mm.
Now, I can't control the future. I can only control what you and I do. So obviously we're in this market condition right now where you know the deal, right? Somebody could be living in the house and all of a sudden your governor come in there and say they don't have to make a payment for 60 days. So that would put you in a terrible position and me in a terrible position. So we're going to have to write a clause in there to protect both of us.
Right. Right.
And it's hard to explain things to negotiate until you just get a rhythm of hearing and understanding it. But let me ask you a question. How many realtors have ever looked at you guys sideways because you told them you bought houses at a discount? Because that doesn't make sense to them.
Right.
That absolutely doesn't make sense to them. People won't sell their house at a discount. No, actually, we make offers buying houses at discounts every day. And a realtor just looks at you with a big moon eyes and goes, I don't know how somebody would do that, right? So you already do something that most people say isn't doable.
Right.
So all I'm asking you to do is embrace the idea is this seller will carry terms, and I know Wendy Sweet wouldn't agree to it. Trust me, I know Tom Olson wouldn't agree to it. I got all that. I'm not, but the seller of the property will agree to things that you don't believe that they will agree to, particularly if you do the one thing they have to do, which is to solve their real estate problem.
Right.
So I believe that whether you're selling turnkeys or whether you're, in other words, most people are looking at seller financing as an immediate fix for the market situation at the moment, which is I need the seller to carry a second lien so I can get a lower loan to value hard money first and make the deal close. Am I right, Wendy? That's where most people are zeroed in on at the very moment.
Right. Right.
But instead of negotiating a short-term seller finance note, why don't you try to negotiate a long-term seller finance note? Meaning that you can write language in that note that they permanently subordinate to a first mortgage.
How do you keep them from, I love that idea. And I know people that are doing that and doing that successfully right now. How do you convince the seller? What are the things that would make them happy? That second position is okay to be in because they've been taught.
They don't know lien position. I mean, that's like go to the old lady Sunday school class at church and start discussing the difference between a first and a second mortgage with them. Do they understand it?
Right.
What you always refer to is to make this work, to give you some cash for the property. Obviously, I have to deal with a mortgage company, right? And it's just presumptive close. The mortgage company's always a first. You don't get off in this. Let me ask you a question, Wendy. Have you got a cell phone?
I do.
Did you read your cell phone contract?
I did not.
And what would happen if you did?
I'd fall asleep.
Either that, or when you got your red pen out, you and your attorney, and you got your red pen out, you wouldn't have a cell phone, would you?
Probably not.
Okay, well, you're dictating the terms of this deal like the cell phone dictated the terms when you got a cell phone.
That absolutely makes sense. That makes sense.
Listen, they have a real estate problem. You didn't cause this pandemic, right? You didn't cause it. You're just trying to solve a problem.
What if, to help them out when you're doing a second, what if you put somewhere, some kind of language in there? No, that wouldn't help. I was thinking that. No, never mind.
Wendy, here's the reality, okay? You're not doing this in a honest manner, right? I mean, this is a Christian-based real estate investor meeting, right? Am I correct?
That's
we're
right.
We're not teaching people to do something dishonest here.
Right.
You're doing something so that you know you can pay them back.
Right.
Okay? Because I'm telling you right now, you and I have a very good mutual friend who did a really strong video who was basically mimicking Warren Buffett's thing of Saturday. And he put out a very strong thing to all his dentists this week.
Yeah.
And he said, do not buy property right now unless you get big discount or big terms.
Right.
Okay, I just am telling you about number 2. If they want to avoid number 1, which is big discount, they got to give you big terms, which is number 2. It's just a market condition.
That's right. That's right.
So now let me tell you this. Everybody that I ever saw teach, and you and Tom and I know a bunch of these guys, right? Everybody I ever saw teach terms before were real estate investors, right? I'm a note guy. I come to the business with 50,000 note closings under my belt and hundreds of thousands of notes I've seen, and tens of thousands of conversations with people that own a note. So my perspective in this business is based on how the person that owns a note thinks, not how the real estate investor thinks they think.
Right.
So the way that I've learned to position these, dictating the terms is based on the fact that I've seen all of this stuff in agreements. So let me tell you the cat's meow, okay? You structure a deal that gives you, when you resell it on a wrap note, it gives you money today because even if you paid a down payment, you get a much bigger down payment, and that's your flip money today, right? That's your transactional income, right? And then you structure a deal where your underlying mortgage payment is much smaller than your wrap payment, and now you get cash flow every month, which, by the way, house flippers don't get, and really people with rental properties don't get much, right?
Right.
So now all of a sudden you own your own bank, and if the toilet gets backed up, you never hear about it. It's not your problem. You're the bank, not a landlord. So a lot of people mentally like that concept, right? Wendy and I happen to like that concept. So here's the thing though, Wendy. If you do traditional financing or even borrow money from a private lender, you owe that money back. You may owe it in the future, but you owe that money back, and you're going to have to pay it back, right? And really the only chance of the bank taking a discount and letting you pay the loan off at a discount is somewhere down the road that you get in trouble, right? You get in trouble and just can't pay them back. And in the 80s, we called it a short payoff. In 2008, we called it a short sale, okay? But it's really where the lender agrees to take a payoff of their loan at a discount. But Wendy, if you do a 20-year seller finance note and you write the correct provisions in there that says that they have to come to you first to sell their note at a discount, and I have a lot to say about how you write that, by the way. The odds of your buying your own note at a discount are just about 100%. Now, if you do a 5-year, 8-year note, your odds are 30%, right? So this is why term is the most important thing. You see, I don't care what you agree the interest rate's going to be in 12 years from now, because you're going to buy your own note at a discount and you ain't got to pay that interest rate. But so term is what makes people sell the note at a discount down the road. It's not rate.
That really makes good sense.
You got to know what you're negotiating for.
That's right. So Eddie, we're sitting at 8:41, and I want to give you an opportunity to tell folks about your class and how they can get more information on it, and what it is that they can expect to learn from that class.
Well, I tell you what would make the most sense, I think, Wendy. I'm going to let them. I don't have like a landing page for your group or anything, but I'm going to do something that's really simple, and I'll promise you we'll have. Our team will deal with it today. Just email info, that's I-N-F-O, info@noteschool.com. Put in the subject line, Wendy Sweet, okay? Because Susan knows Wendy, and she'll make sure that her staff, that handles all this. If you'll just do that and make sure that you, in the body of the email, just have your name, your cell phone number. Obviously, you send it to us with an email and your name, right? Because that way we're gonna text part of it to you, and we're gonna email part of it to you. Because we can't just email everything, because people have junk mail and they lose it and whatever. So we do it both ways. So just make sure you please put your cell. We won't aggravate you. We won't hammer you to death with a bunch of stuff. So I know what everybody's worried about. But here's the best thing. We're going to send you back a page that's just going to be a landing page. And that landing page is going to have a little book I've written. It's about 30 pages long. Okay. And it's called It's a Whole New Ball Game with Creative Financing. So the concept of the book is like the movie, the Moneyball movie.
Right.
And it's the same concept, right? He looked at baseball through a different set of eyes, and I'm just getting your mind prepared to look at real estate through a different set of eyes, right? Of financing. And then we'll have a 90-minute thing. The guy that does that for me is a young, spiritual, young guy. I say young, he's less than 40. That's young to me, right?
It is to me too.
No, he's in his 30s, and he's a seasoned real estate investor. His name is Brian Lochner, and he does a 90-minute presentation. It's really live. It's not a pre-taped thing. And he has a very good way of communicating this at not what I'm more prone to do, which is at a boardroom level, right? He just lays it out really simple and easy. And at the end of it, it's 90 minutes, and it's sort of a tag on from there. You can progress forward to like a one-day class, right? So it's good, solid stuff. I'm sort of giving you the punchline of what can be accomplished, and he sort of gives you more of the formula to get to that.
Awesome. Okay, so I have typed in our chat the info@noteschool.com. Add Wendy Sweet to the subject line. If you want to save the chat that's on there, folks, all you have to do is go to the 3 little dots that are at the bottom right-hand side of the Zoom group chat, and you can save that chat. So you can go back and look at notes. You can see what people are saying. If any of you that have houses for sale or looking to buy or anything that you want to talk about, you can put it right over there in that chat, and everybody can save it and put your email in there so people can get back to you as well. And remember too, if you're not receiving any emails from me, reminders about Sonrisers, you need to just send me an email, wendy@carolinahardmoney.com, and I will get you on there. We don't sell on that email. We're not pushing anything. All I'm doing is sending reminders about these meetings. So Eddie, I can't thank you enough for sharing what you've shared with us today. I'm always amazed at what you know about real estate and how you view things and how you're able to come up with constantly new ways of of making a deal. And that's really what it's about, is making a deal that works for not only, you know, you, the buyer, but also the seller. You always come up with great, wonderful things. And I'm really, really grateful for that. So thank you, Eddie. Again, I can't thank you enough. And, you know, I'd love to have you on again in the near future if you're willing.
I'm willing. I'll try to have an internet that works a little better. I tried to stay at the house this morning, and I guess I sort of got zapped on that deal. But thank you very much, Wendy. I'm honored you say that. I'm just a specialist, right? I'm a specialist that spent 40 years learning one little something, and I don't want to take credit for it, but thank you for your compliment.
Well, it's awesome. And if you did get the email and you saw Eddie and his gorgeous wife hold a little baby, that's their grandchild. Which how is he doing now?
Colt, yeah, he is good. He's actually a little chunk right now, so he weighs about 25 pounds. He's about I think he's almost 7 months, at the end of 7 months old. And so
wow.
We are going to the ranch today, and our daughter Emily and her husband Matt are staying with us, and she's a professional ballet dancer, and she's off season, so they're staying with us. Matt works with us, and so we are going up to Nakona, Texas, to the ranch and going to hang out. And anyway, gonna have a good day.
Awesome.
I hope.
That's awesome. If I could sneak on an airplane, I'd pop in.
I'd love to see you. All right,
Martha,
guys. Thank you very much. I'm honored you'd have me.
Well, thank you. Tell Martha hello, and I want everyone to have a wonderful Mother's Day. Reach out to someone who may not even be your mother, and tell them Happy Mother's Day. And remember the people who can't be mothers, because I was one of those for such a long time. Let them know how special they are as well. Have a great, great weekend, and we will see you guys next week. Love you, mean it. Don't forget to save the chat. Ta-ta.